Anyway, guess what day it is? It's 20-minute Tuesday, and we're back with round two of interview prep. If you didn't see round one, go check out last week's 20-minute Tuesday clip. I believe it's on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so going through the zengig checklist of how to prep for an interview. We're going to start with print several copies of your resume. Now, I know we're in a digital world now where a lot of resumes are sent in digitally, but what is your advice on printed copies?
I mean, if you're going to be interviewing in person, I think I'll caveat this first by saying, obviously, if you're doing a Zoom interview or something like that, it's not really necessary. But going on into an in-person interview, I cannot tell you the amount of times I have talked to candidates who they brought maybe one resume, and then they go in and they're like, "Oh, so-and-so manager is going to join us too," and then they're going to share one resume, and you're sitting across the table from three people trying to look at one piece of paper, passing it around. So, yeah, I would say bring multiple physical copies of your resume if you're interviewing in person, because you never know who's going to join in. You never know who you want to give it to. Maybe someone wants to circle something or write some notes on it. Maybe you want to write some notes on your own resume. It's cheap, it's quick, and it's a good way to make a first impression really good and seem like you're prepared to have a bunch of them.
Yeah, it falls into the category, like so many things, of you don't have to do it. And there's plenty of stories of candidates who get hired without doing it, but it helps your chances. It shows that you're willing to make an extra effort, or just make effort, right? It shows that you're committed and serious about the role. And so I think that applies to so much of the advice that we give is don't do the minimum, do the most. That should be your objective as a candidate who's interviewing in what is an extremely competitive job market right now. As I wrote in a post on LinkedIn earlier today, it's not 2022 anymore. That's a distant memory. This is a market where you shouldn't leave anything to chance. So bring extra copies of your resume. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah, it's going to make you feel more confident, I feel like. And that's if nothing else, feeling like you're not thrown off your game. Even if there are extra people, you've got extras, you're confident, you're prepared. Anything you can do to make yourself, shine and feel better when you're going into that.
Now, I'm just going to ask you guys some questions on the fly that a candidate might, be thinking. So how many copies of my resume would you recommend I bring to the interview?
I mean, I would say if it's supposed to be a one-on-one interview, maybe bring 2 extra copies. So 3 minimum would be. I mean, when in doubt, bring it. More. You can't really go wrong with. You could have five copies of your resume. It's fine. I don't want you to go crazy and carry a whole binder, but I would say at least 2 extra ones.
Is it preferable to have my resume printed in color, or is black and white acceptable?
Stay away from color.
Yeah, unless you're a graphic designer, then maybe that would be the only area where I'd say you want to show a little bit. But stay away from color.
No pink or green resumes, no scented paper. No, don't distract from why you're there. Right? I mean, it's being gimmicky. That advice is given sometimes. I think it's bad advice. Unless, like Peter said, if you're applying for a creative role, then all right, you can take a chance and be creative. Anything else? That's not what the interviewer is there for.
Yep.
Perfect answer. All right, let's move on to checklist. I believe we are on number 8. And this one is pack the essentials. So let's talk about what to bring and what not to bring. And I'll start off with gum. Don't bring gum, because then you're going to forget you're chewing it during your interview, and that's going to be really bad and awkward when you have to go spit it out or trying to talk to the interviewer while you're chewing. So don't do that.
Yeah, definitely don't bring gum. I would even say leave any food or drink, like all of that, leave it behind. Things to do to bring, I would say pen and paper for sure. Obviously your resumes, anything, any sort of business card or anything like that. If you've got one, that's also good. Really just professional things that are going to contribute to the actual interview itself.
Can we talk about water bottles for a minute? Ashley, I know you would recommend bringing a water bottle. Who gets that thirsty or dehydrated during an interview? Is that, like, I think the water bottle thing's gone too far. Can we agree that you don't need to bring one everywhere you go?
Yeah.
I'll say this. So during your interview, obviously you're not going to just go and like take a sip while, you're conversating.
Then why are you bringing it?
Afterwards,
Hydrated.
interviewing is a lot of hard work. Afterwards, you're going to want water probably because you're going to be all nervous. Like the nerves are going to be calming down. You did it. It's kind of like after running a race, you're going to be tired. And
It's nothing like running a race. No, you're sitting down. I mean, unless you're interviewing to be a marathoner, you're not running a race. You're just sitting and talking. Leave the water bottle at home. It's a distraction. Like, you don't want to come in with gear. Nobody needs gear. Just leave it. Bare essentials. That's the goal.
Mhm.
all right, again, some questions that candidates might have. Here, I'm going to ask you on the fly. Is it advisable to bring a backpack to an interview if it looks professional and neat, or should I strictly opt for a briefcase or a purse?
I would say it would have to be real professional looking. And like with anything, judge the company culture. If you're interviewing for a software developer role and you've got like a professional, a really professional bag and you're dressed in business casual and that's the whole vibe of the office, I think it's probably not the end of the world. I would say the best case scenario is just bring a folder with some paper and pen in it and your resumes. That's really all you need. I don't think you need a whole bunch of other stuff.
And I think we did miss one. I know a lot of people don't carry cash nowadays, but you never know if you're going to need it. So maybe just bring a little bit of cash just in case you have to pay for parking or tip a valet. Next question that a candidate might ask. I was going to say, would bringing a reusable water bottle be acceptable? But water bottles are out of the question.
Look, no one's you're not going to be passed over because of it. It just it's just an unnecessary thing, right? I just think
it's clutter in your mind, just more things to remember or forget. Like, you want to be in the zone. You want to be thinking about the job and getting to know the interview. You don't want to be like, holding a bunch of stuff.
Next question. Is it appropriate to take notes on the notepad during the interview, or should it be used strictly for jotting down pre-interview thoughts? So I guess when you're during your interview, while the interviewer's talking, is it rude to just start jotting things down? Or
no, I don't think it's rude. I think it makes sense if like, people have habits and styles and how they approach things. So if you're someone who's a note taker and that is how something you intend to do during the interview, just acknowledge it up front and ask if the interviewer minds. They're always going to say, no, of course I don't mind. But to your point, you don't want to have to consider whether they're wondering if you're doodling, right? Which you of course aren't, but just go ahead and say, do you mind if I take notes? They'll say no, by all means, take notes. And then you just get that out of the way. So
yeah, I would actually encourage it. And like the people I've interviewed that have done that, they're the people who are really engaged. Now, as long it's more about how engaged you are. If you're looking down and you're clearly making eye contact, you're listening to them, but you're actually writing down what they're saying, I think it actually can be a plus.
Okay. And now this is just, again, a question. So let's see what your stance is on this. Would it be acceptable to bring a small snack in case the interview lasts longer than expected? Or should I avoid this?
Stop, move on. No. You're not in kindergarten with the water bottles and the snacks and the juice box. No, just no.
Have you guys ever had like a candidate that's ever done that before? That's like brought a snack and just started snacking during the interview?
No. I mean, I can think of a couple times where I've talked to people who've been on long, day-long interviews where they're going kind of on a meet and greet with the team, but they always give you time. They're like, hey, we'll meet back here in an hour. You're going to have lunch. It's not like you need to run out to the hallway and eat a Nutri-Grain bar and then run back in.
all I can picture as you're saying that was Ali Sheedy in the Breakfast Club. That's all I could picture. No snacks, no food on the table.
Yeah.
All right. Then that settles that. Let's go on to the next, which is review the directions. So how important is it to review the directions before going to your interview?
Very important. That's the last thing you want is to be lost and late on your in the interview day.
Yeah. And I'll go even further with that. If it's not a ridiculously long commute, drive it ahead of time. If you can, do it on the weekend or the evening. A couple evenings before your interview. It's not always practical to do it, but the point of saying that is that you want to take as much extra stress and anxiety out of the situation as you can, and knowing where you're going. And listen, as a career salesperson, I've gotten lost heading to new meetings, new prospect locations lots of times, and it's a terrible feeling. And it really throws you off your game when you're worried about being late and you're confused. And look, I mean, now granted, there's a lot of apps like Waze that make the commute easier and directions easier, but parking is sometimes a challenge. We've had a candidate, and this is going back years, so I don't mind saying it, who parked in the owner's parking space. This guy was late to his interview, pulled up in the owner's spot, and it was like something out of a movie. Would have gotten the job, but didn't because of that. The owner was not happy, and it happened, and it was because the candidate was late. So if you can, prepare as much as possible and drive the route before interview day.
Yeah.
And let's just say you're, having a virtual interview. So confirm which video conferencing app you're going to be using and ensure it's installed and functioning correctly. So if you're not dealing with directions and you're dealing with technology, just make sure everything is set up beforehand.
Yep. 100%.
Is it okay for a candidate to ask these questions? Could you please provide more details or landmarks to ensure I reach the correct location for the in-person interview? Do you think that's okay for someone to ask?
Yeah, to ask for directions and advice? Yeah, of course.
Like ahead of time, just ask for like any landmarks or just to make sure you're going to the right place.
Definitely. I mean, do as much as you can ahead of time with that. I mean, our recruiters generally will share as much as they can in terms of exactly what you just said, landmarks, knowing where the right parking lot is, knowing what entrance to use. There's another client who we recruited for a long time, very big, well-known employer in Central Florida, probably the biggest, and they have locations all over the place, and some of them were really obscure. They were unmarked and weird locations. Drive through a parking lot and make this turn. I mean, I'm thinking of a couple particular offices, and it was a nightmare to find. And every time I went, I was confused as to how to get there. So if you're a recruiter and you're listening right now, give your candidates every opportunity to make it easy. And if you're a candidate, just ask. The more you ask up front, the better prepared you're going to be for interview day.
Yep.
Here's some questions that I'm going to ask you guys on the fly that candidates might ask. Is it okay to contact the interviewer on the day of the interview should I have trouble finding the location?
Yeah, I would say that if it's granted, it's early enough ahead of time, and you're not like calling him 10 minutes after you were supposed to be there. If it's 30 minutes ahead of time, and you're like, hey, I'm trying to find a place and I can't, whatever. I think that's okay. It shows that you're on the way and that you're really trying and that you're there. If you've got a recruiter, do the same thing. I think that is that's an okay thing to do.
Now, going back to virtual interview, is it okay to ask the interviewer if you could perform a test call to ensure all technical details are in order before the virtual interview starts?
Yeah, I would say that's fine. And I've actually had candidates do that where, it's been a Zoom meeting or something. And I'll get the notification since and they'll log into the meeting to make sure everything works. I'll get that like the night before or something like that. And I've just done it enough times that I know that's what's happening is it's someone testing to make sure their computer works.
Okay, perfect. Let's go on to the next, which is prepare physically. Any advice you guys have here? How can someone physically prepare for their interview? I know you guys have a lot of advice on that and a lot of good resources to share.
Yeah, so err on the side of being professionally dressed. And what I like the guideline I like to use is really two things. One, ask the recruiter who you're working with, the person setting up the interview. It might be a hiring manager, depending on the situation. But whoever's coordinating the interview, that's the question you want to ask. How should I dress? Assume you're going to be formal. And if they tell you to back that down, the second thing I recommend is still dress a little bit nicer than everyone else will be in the room. So if they're super casual, be business casual. If they're business casual, for guys wear a coat, right? I don't know what off the top of my head, women what equivalent might be, but wear something that's a little bit nicer than business casual. And if they're wearing button-down shirts, then wear a tie, right? Yeah. So just always there on the side of being slightly better dressed than everyone else in the room. You can't go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Some questions since we have 4 minutes left on the clock. How early would you advise arriving before the scheduled interview time to ensure punctuality and preparedness?
I say default is usually 30 minutes. That's my personal one. I know some people will say 50, at least 15 minutes, but 30 minutes gives you a little bit of leeway that if you're late, you're still 15 minutes early. So.
Especially if you don't try to find directions beforehand, you don't want to. I know one time when I went to an interview, I got there 30 minutes early, but it took me like a good chunk to figure out where I was going. So technically, I got there like 15 minutes beforehand. So definitely 30 minutes. What else? Is there, can you suggest any relaxation or focus techniques to utilize before the interview to help, with the nerves or anything? Any tips on how to get rid of those interview jitters?
Yeah. So I'll suggest a couple things which really aren't relaxation tips as much as they are preparation tips. So if you are prepared going in, you'll have more reason to be confident. We have on Zengig, we have over 70 common interview questions. Read through those. Prepare yourself for situational questions, tricky questions. It's all there. Read through them. It doesn't take that long. And then you at least you'll have an idea of how you'll answer if you get asked these questions. And then, as we said, I mean, being early is such a big component of being relaxed, knowing where to go, arriving ahead of time, and then you can do some homework while you're in the car, read the latest company news, review some other interview information. The last thing I'll say is mock interviews. That's a great thing to do. We have a recent blog article about mock interviews. We could probably do a whole show about those. Maybe we will soon. But go through the process as much as you can. And if you take it seriously and you do all of this preparation, you're going to do really good, very, very well on interview day.
Perfect.
Yep.
So that was all of the checklist. It's 19 minutes and 45 seconds. I think we did great going through all of that. Again, for anyone who wants to see the whole thing, go to zengig.com. You can actually download the checklist. And when the day comes, you can check off everything in case you don't miss the big important stuff. So any last closing remarks?
No comments today? What's up with that?
No comments.
20-minute
everyone's
Tuesdays.
Interview ready.
Yeah. Come join us on Thursday with your comments. I'll let them, they can marinate over the next 2 days and come fresh on Thursday.
And let it fly on Thursday. We'll be ready.
All right.
Well, it's good to have, by the way, it's good to have the millennial back. So, well,
yeah.
Yes, I'm back. It's all right. I know you guys missed me last week, so.
We did. It wasn't the same, but you were there in spirit. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes, I did see. So. That was my true spirit there. I'm glad you guys.
Highlight of that whole episode. All right. Till next time, everybody.